Today we're going to talk about poster presentations. Okay, what's the difference between a poster presentation and a PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah. And I want to learn because I don't know that much about poster presentations. So I'm going to pick Charlie's brain because he thinks he knows about it.
Okay, yeah, I think. Anyway, this is the Learning Lounge. I've got Shane here beside me. My name is Charlie. And the objective of the Learning Lounge is to help you get better grades or get the grades that you feel that you deserve for the work that you put in terms of assignments, exams, etc., etc., etc. And over the years, Shane, myself, and Kathy, who's not with us today, we've learned that students are making the same mistakes, and it's the same mistakes over and over and over and over again. So the purpose of the Learning Lounge is to give you a little bit of, insights as to what we see on our side of the table, let's say, from a lecturing point of view, what we're looking for, and the mistakes that students actually make. So we were talking earlier, apart from the rugby, right? Shane was asking about poster presentations. They apply for both an assignment and a dissertation. Traditionally, you would always be asked to do a PowerPoint presentation of some kind.
Yeah.
And the PowerPoint presentation would extract the most important pieces of information that's either in your assignment or in your dissertation. The poster presentation is exactly the same.
Okay.
If you've got 6 or 7 slides on your PowerPoint for your presentation,
I wish.
and that would be good.
Yeah.
If you've got 6 or 7, you've got your introduction, your literature review, your research methodology, your findings, discussion, etc., etc. So with a PowerPoint presentation, you compress all of that into one 10-slide, let's say, presentation. So you extract the kernel, most important points. Obviously, everything has to link together. With a poster presentation, actually, all you're doing is taking exactly the same and sticking it onto an A3 size sheet of paper. Now, you can dress it up. So, for example, if we had it here, right, we'd have our introduction up there, linking into our literature review, linking into our research methodologies, our findings, etc., etc. And then the student actually just talks through the whole thing.
So how does that work though? Because, I get the idea of the presentations, but we're kind of used to that. And we've been doing, it was a presentation before it was even PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Right. But now, so if you're telling your story, right, do you gather around the poster? How does that work? Because we're used to sitting back, I suppose, and looking up at a screen and somebody standing in front of it.
Yeah, the ones that I've experienced in the past would be, let's say, the panel. Okay,
Yeah.
these would be the people who would be your first marker, your second marker. They would actually stand in front, and it's like a sales pitch.
Yeah.
Where you might go to some of these trade fairs, and somebody comes up, and you've got the sales guy standing there, and the sales guy is doing the whole demonstration of what it is they're selling. So you're basically doing the same. It's a lot less formal. Mm-hmm. I think it's more relaxing for the student.
Yeah.
Mainly because when you make a presentation, you're facing the audience.
Yeah.
But this time you're actually turned and you're facing your screen. So you're kind of not maintaining that eye contact with the audience. And because everything is here, if you're really, really good, you're one slide ahead of what you're talking about. So you're able to kind of connect the whole thing together.
Yeah.
Where with a PowerPoint presentation, you've only got the one slide in front of you.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you can still use, your prompt notes and all of that kind of thing. I think some students panic because they lose it's something completely different that they've never done before.
Yeah.
But they've been doing it for 3 years. They've been doing it for 4 years.
So they should know their
presentation.
They should know their subject, right?
Yeah.
What their story.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And everything is on it, from your introduction all the way down to in the bottom right-hand corner or the bottom left-hand corner, your list of references.
Okay. So you're thinking and presenting your story in a different way, but it's you still have to get to the same objective.
Yeah.
Here's what I set out to do. Here's what I found, and here's what this means.
Yes. And you're limited because with a PowerPoint, let's say you're limited with a PowerPoint presentation to 10 slides. with animation in a slide, you can actually put in 20 different slides, one on top of the
Yeah.
other, but
Yeah.
it's still 10 slides. With the poster presentation, you can't. So the information that you put on it is critical.
It's fixed.
Yeah, right. Because once the poster is done, there's no change. And the information, like any presentation, it has to flow. So whatever you put in your introduction, let's say your research question, your rationale, your objectives, your sub-questions, there has to be a link directly into your literature review. So when you take the kernel points out of the literature review, they have to relate back to your aims and objectives. But then when you have your research methodology, there has to be a very clear line between the two, which I think puts an extra little bit of pressure on the students doing a poster presentation, because now that there's no margin for error here.
Everything's out front.
Everything's on front.
So if you've got somebody like me who's coming and looking at your poster presentation,
Yeah,
and I might read your poster differently.
absolutely.
No, I might read your poster down as opposed to across.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But and then if that is the case, it goes back to the actual presentation of the poster.
The introduction of it, I mean.
The printing.
Oh, the printing, okay, yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
the style.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
So if you were doing PowerPoint, all your slides would have a heading like introduction, literature review. On the poster presentation, you still have to have, okay, this is my literature. Now you don't have to call it a literature review. You could call it the sources of literature, as long as your audience knows that's what that is.
Yeah.
Okay, and again, a lot of students they can dress up the poster, lots of different colors, and the other big advantage, as we know, with PowerPoint, if you're in the audience and PowerPoint, they get the color scheme wrong.
Yeah.
If you're sitting at the back,
Yeah, yeah.
you can't read the text. But with the poster presentation, you're actually up as we are here, and oh yeah, I can see how all of this. So in terms of the color scheme, you've got a little bit more flexibility.
I suppose as well, the poster has to stand on its own too. So
Oh, it
if
does,
I'm
yeah,
coming in, I should be able to look at the poster and follow the logic
Yes, yes.
and get the story even without somebody introducing it to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
The purpose of the student there basically is this is my research and this is what I found. But again, you're dead right. If you were there earlier and all the posters were stuck to the wall and you started reading them, you should be able to follow
The logic, yeah.
the story. So in the introduction, when you've got your research questions, when you get your conclusions at the end, you have to be able to put the two of them together.
So you could, if I'm doing one, right, I could help that process with, it's almost like reverse mind mapping. You know, I can show you using arrows and graphics.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can take you on the journey.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So it strikes me then that, first of all, there's a mind shift in preparation,
There is.
right? And you really need to think about your overall story to put an effective poster together. If I'm building a slideshow, we've obviously done this for a long time. You know, we can build our slides. You can move them around, and you
Yes.
can, because you're making your story in elements. And okay, you can get that sequence going, but with a poster, you actually need to get that structure, that connectivity really right. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah, and once it's committed to print, there's no change.
That's right. So it's out there. It's done.
It's done. It's done. Where
Yeah.
with PowerPoint, as we know in the past, at the very last minute, students are updating this and making modifications, changing that, and I forgot to put this in, and everything is even just before they actually walk into the audience to make the presentation.
Yeah.
But generally, with the posters, sometimes they could be printed a week in advance, and then they're submitted.
I suppose you can mock it up with you can do A4s and
There are specialist printers.
yeah.
There's a
An A2,
Reed
A1.
will be able to do it. I think Reeds are in Abbey Street. There's a couple of other places around. The ones that I've seen, the students have gone above and beyond, and they've really made the effort, and the combination of the color schemes, and it's got the voice. I'm thinking here.
Yeah.
And it's a little voice.
The bubbles.
The bubble. There's a little bubble on the side, and when you're reading it, you kind of say, actually, apart from the content, the effort that's gone into this, is exceptional. And again, that goes back to when we were talking in a previous session about presentation skills, right? The effort you put in actually makes the whole thing a whole lot easier, and sticks the whole thing together.
It also means that you're not going to be able to do it last minute.
Yeah.
You can't. You can't
Yeah.
budget the way we do some presentations sometimes.
And with that as well, like all presentations, students panic, they get stressed. But again, as we say, as you know, we say to them, this is your story.
Yeah.
Write it out on A4 pages, give it to a stranger, get them to read it, and if they understand exactly what you're talking about, okay, well, that makes sense. So all you've got to do now is decide on the color scheme, the graphics that are actually going to go into it, and charts and graphs. And again, you can't have slide after slide after slide after slide of chart and graphs.
No.
Max, you'd have 4. But you've got to make sure that those 4 are the most important.
Yeah.
Or you could be very creative and use one slide and actually have overlaps of different results in the one slide by using different color schemes.
We're back to creative data presentation then.
Exactly.
So there's actually a number of different skill sets coming to play into this.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think one of the conversations we're going to have is around storytelling and the storytelling process.
Yes.
Whether it's a poster presentation, whether it's a PowerPoint, or even a dissertation paper or an essay, and there's probably an element of, I hate to use the term creative writing in academic terms, but there's a way to tell a story.
I agree with you. I think there's a lot of creative writing.
Yeah.
And I think the further up the food chain you go in terms of your studies, your style of academic writing actually does have to become a little bit more creative, because you need to capture the interest of the audience, the reader. And if you, it's like any book that you read, if you don't get that in the first page or two, that's it. You're not going to get it down for the rest.
Yeah. I've got a few of those books at home.
Yeah, and you can forget about how snazzy the cover sheet actually is. You can forget about how snazzy the diagrams and the charts and the images. If the narrative around it is very difficult to follow, it's not going to work.
So, am I right then? If we're doing a poster presentation, part of an assessment brief in a class, right? Then your poster is going to be up there at the same time as everybody else's, potentially. It could be like a little gallery.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's a competitive edge, possibly too.
Yes.
Okay.
So you're dead right. It's not a case where you go in, you stick your poster to the wall. There's a limited audience there. You could have 50 to 60 people, students, and 1 or 2 friends maybe might arrive. And even though you are presenting to the audience, you're presenting to your markers and your second marker.
Yeah.
So in terms of that competitive edge, in terms of I want my poster, my story, to be more interesting than the one beside.
Yeah. So it could actually be a really interesting thing in a college then to have a poster present, or even possibly for different modules on the same day, and it being an event.
Yes, I have to be honest. And I was saying this to Eileen. Eileen is the head honcho in the Holmes Institute. I was saying this to
Our host today.
Our host today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was saying it to Eileen when I actually saw the poster presentation. I said, Eileen, I don't particularly like this. I think this is really, a poster for God. And she said, no, wait till you see it. And I said, oh, okay. The final research projects came in, and I have to say, I sat there and I went, wow.
Yeah.
It was a completely different, the way the students presented themselves, the way they presented the posters, the way they spoke about the posters. And I could see that they were engrossed a lot more in telling their story than if they were sitting at the end of a computer looking into Zoom with slides.
Yeah.
There was a huge sense of pride in the poster itself, the content, the style of it, the way they presented it, absolutely everything. And then they moved to the next one.
Yeah.
But the students were then asking questions about all the other research. And in some cases, they were actually referring back to their research where they recognized, oh, there's a link here between the two.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay,
Yeah.
if we did normal presentations, they'd get in, they'd do their 15-minute presentation, gone.
Yeah.
Where it was a final, this is the whole class. It was perfect.
So there's a number of wins here, right, with this?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
I was
there's a number of
impressed.
wins.
I came out with a completely different perspective of the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, okay, okay. But here's the hard question, right?
Yeah.
Is it harder to do than a presentation? If I'm a student,
Yeah.
right, I actually see the benefits, okay? But as a student, is it more work or more complex, more risk, or is it just different than if I have to do a presentation?
It's a presentation. And I think over the 3 years or 4 years of the course that students are actually doing, they get used to doing PowerPoint presentations. Okay, and there's a certain format to that. And when you get comfortable in that format, you get a little bit complacent. You see, and if it's worked, if the format has worked for you before, I'm going to stick with the same format. So you like a little bit of creativity. But with this one, the poster presentation, I'm saying the same thing, but it's all on the screen at the same time.
Yeah, it's all there.
Yeah. And I have a limited amount of space to put the most important pieces of information in.
So you have to make good decisions.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes students panic about that. But in reality, they've been doing presentations for years.
Yeah.
They're well used to presentations. This is just a different style of a presentation. That's all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
I do look forward to them. I find that they're different. It gives the student a completely different opportunity. And again, if we look at it, let's say the next level, in business, in management, sometimes you have to be very creative about how you're actually going to present information. And you can't keep falling back to the default all the time. Oh, I'm standing here, I'm talking, you listen. Sometimes the presentations is all about throw the rule book out, you know, and make it up as you go along.
Yeah.
And the difference between the two is, with the posters, this is what I found. There's no margin for error. You have to demonstrate that, okay, this is mine. I did this, and I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah. So it's a variation on the presentations again, right? It's not posted yet, and I actually think that this is possibly, you know, more interesting, more beneficial for the learner as well. We're doing a sort of a podcasting, like a recorded presentation.
Yes.
So so students submit their presentation with a voiceover.
Okay.
You know, it's like a little mini movie, if you like, which creates evidence in one sense, but I don't see the same sort of engagement necessarily.
Yeah.
I think back and forth.
I did some work on a master's program, and as part of one of the modules, they had to make a pre-recorded presentation. Right. The brief was very, very broad, so they could interpret the brief themselves.
Yeah.
And the problem with it was, some did it on their iPhones, and some went to the other extreme and did a very one chap in particular, I'm nearly sure he got Steven Spielberg to come in and produce it for him, because it was so slick, really, that it. And I even said it to him. I said, "Who did that?" Oh, no, he has his own business. He said, "My secretary dabbles in all this." I said, "No, she didn't." I said, "That's a professional." How do you mark that?
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult to mark. From our perspective, it's very difficult to mark that.
To be fair.
Yeah, we don't want to mark down the one who does it on their iPhone or another one. The room was so dark, you could hear them, but you couldn't see them.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
And there was no PowerPoint support. It was just one big long monologue.
So my fear in that is that it becomes more about the process than about the content.
Yes.
You know. Having said that, let's be clear. Like there are lessons and learnings necessary around how you convey and present information. That should be.
Yeah.
You've got to tell your arguments. You've got to tell your story, which we'll be covering again. But you can't get lost in the process because it's a poster or a presentation or a podcast or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With the PowerPoint presentation and the poster, there's a set format.
Yep.
You know, there is a kind of a formal approach to doing things. With the video recording, you know,
And yet your audience is the same.
yeah,
Your audience, because you're doing this for your assessor. So you got to figure out, what does my assessor want?
yes,
And how best do I give them the evidence to get my grade, which is what we're about here.
yeah. Some of the videos that I did see reminded me a little of us doing this,
Yeah.
and
The learning process.
The learning process. Microphones that sometimes worked and didn't work, camera, background, lighting, all of that. Where if we were as lecturers, we were going to actually give a video recording as an assessment, we'd need to come up with a bulletproof template.
Yeah.
This is what you have to do,
Yeah.
because it with respect to the students,
Yep.
allowing the students to go off and do it themselves.
Yeah.
There was one, I don't know where he got actually it was done during COVID, and he must have went into town with a drone, and he recorded empty streets
Okay.
over Dublin, and he stood outside Dáil Éireann speaking into the camera as a reporter.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
Yeah.
But then the next clip went to him sitting behind a desk, in the house where the lighting wasn't great and all that. Now, admittedly, he had a problem with his computer and he lost the second bit. But the first bit was like, wow, with the second bit. And in fairness to him, he made every effort. He got the marks all right. But when you're doing that kind of recording, there's so many different factors that have to be taken into consideration.
So, like, no matter which avenue you're going, whichever avenue we're going, I mean, there's clarity about process that we probably need to set up with people. Like, it's not just do a poster, do a presentation, do a podcast. You've got to deliver against the learning objectives, communicate your message, and whatever the channel or the medium or the mechanism, you really need to get clear about your process early enough, or you're going to be up against lost some of my material because my computer crashed, or the weather was bad, or for whatever reason. I mean, I had one set of students, they sent me in their presentation, which was a silent movie. It's effectively what it was. It wasn't meant to be, but it became a silent movie. And, and that was down to, errors and production and pressure at the time.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a conversation around process, I think, some of the stuff.
Definitely. And, as lecturers, sometimes we are guilty as lecturers, in terms of not giving enough information. And we did a previous session on how to read the assignment brief. One of the crucial ingredients in the assignment brief is very clear direction in terms of, okay, this is what's required.
Yeah.
Now, similarly,
Yeah.
if we put down this is what's required, that's what you have to do, But I do know there are some lecturers can be very lax in giving that kind of information. And then when it's submitted, students are graded or they lose marks, but they don't know why they lost marks, but they've lost marks because they didn't do it this way, but I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So when have a look at the recording on reading the assignment brief. If you're not happy with the brief, if you feel there isn't enough information on it, ask the lecturer. What do you want? How do you want it? When do you want it? What style, shape, color scheme, everything.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you, folks. So that was a discussion on poster presentations as opposed to or other PowerPoint presentations as part of one of our series at the Learning Lounge. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode.
On the next episode.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.